We're gonna do a rules teach of Ecos First Continent. This is one of the hot new games out of Essenspiel in Germany this year, and it definitely deserves the hype. I was not in the hype train, but I was willing to play it, and I've just been playing it into the ground since, so it definitely is worth you looking into. Hopefully this rules video will help you understand the game a little better. Alright, to set up Ecos, you're going to take your components and set them out. You've got a score track back here that someone's going to have to manage and keep track of for people. You've got some forests and mountain pieces. You've got land tiles that are double-sided. They're either grasslands or desert. You've got water tiles that are just decoratively two-sided. They don't really have a purpose other than to be water. And you've got these awesome little trays that you'll have to assemble before your first game and sort all of your different animals into their various types. And there's not just one tray of animals, there's two trays of animals. There are a lot of options in this game. Alright, you also have this other box you'll have to assemble, which is just a crate full of little wooden cubes. These are for resource tracking and making sure everyone can keep track of what's going on their own card tableau. I'm going to focus entirely on one player's side of the game. There is a little bit of glare on these cards back here. Hopefully, as I explain them, they'll be more visible. To start the game, everyone is either going to get 8 of these rather easy engine building cards and 4 of these blue, more late game, larger point payoff possible cards. Or, if you're playing 2-player, you're going to go ahead and give everyone 2 of the blue and 4 of the brown right away before doing the rest of the process. The couple of ways you can do setup is you can go through the cards and look for symbols in the corner of them. All of them usually have symbols on left or right. For your first time, they recommend you use the left ones with animals and sort them by those symbols. There should be 12 cards in each stack once people end up with them. That would be 4 of the blue and 8 of the reddish-brown ones. These are just recommended cards that have definite synergy and is going to make everyone be able to get into playing the game quickly. You could also just randomly deal cards, or what I like to do is the draft. The way the draft works is you're going to take a certain number of these cards, normally 9 of these for this color, and then everyone's going to select one and pass, select one, pass, select one, pass. You're going to do the same thing for the blues. I actually recommend you do the blue draft first because it's going to give people some big in-game goal to work towards, and they're going to want to pick up red cards they might otherwise have ignored that are going to help them do that in-game objective and get a huge payout. The game goes until there are 80 points for any given player and a turn change is necessary. The way a turn change happens is from the primary mechanism of Ecos. Ecos, every turn, someone's going to reach into this bag and draw 1 tile if it's a multiplayer game, and 2 tiles if it's simply a 2-player game. Each one of these tiles has an elemental symbol on it, and then everyone's going to go to their cards and look for that exact same elemental symbol, like this one has at the top there, and they're going to take one of their resource cubes and place it on top of that symbol. Once every symbol is covered on a card, they're going to call Eco, and that card is going to be able to resolve. The resolve order, if multiple cards go off at once, is based on who is currently holding the bag and is the Harbinger. I really like being called the Harbinger in this game. That was kind of a fun little detail as well. Alright, so that's the main mechanism. Draw a tile, place a cube, eventually start activating cards and doing things. This is an interesting game as an engine builder because every player has an engine based on their cards, and everyone has an engine based on the map. The map is going to greatly change the payout from all these different cards and what you're doing. And ultimately, this is a shared engine. If someone else is doing something that you have a card for, if you don't let them realize that they're helping you as well, you can get a lot of payoff piggybacking on their strategy. You can also just absolutely go to town on your one single strategy and hope they don't come up with a card that's going to eat a bunch of your animals or replace map tiles and change the configuration in a horrible way. That's just your quick overview for the game. let's talk about placement rules. If you need to place a tile, did I pull out one of these that has a place tile on it? I didn't. If I were to get a card that says down arrow tile, in this case specifically grasslands, you take that type of tile from the stack and you place it anywhere on the board so that at least one edge is touching. There are no rules that the tile has to be next to a certain type. There's nothing like that going on in Ecos. You just need to connect at least one edge of it somewhere on the map, and you're trying to manipulate the map for a lot of these. Sometimes you want large connected landmass, sometimes you want little tiny islands surrounded by water, other times you want large sections of water that are not connected, all sorts of different things that you could be incentivized to do where the points on the cards will change based on the map. So that's placement rules for tiles, you just place them. What about these mountain things? If you have the ability to drop a mountain, you can place it on any land tile. If you have the ability to place a tree and you want to grow a forest, well, surprising absolutely everyone in this game, you can plant a forest in the grassland. It is ready to grow a forest. But, this might actually surprise you slightly, you can always grow a tree on top of a mountain. If there's already a mountain there, that desert now can support a forest. That is basically it for placement rules. Let's talk about animals. Each animal has their own icon and tells you where they're allowed to be. For example, this little hippo here has indicators on the top two sides where both of my fingers are. Hopefully I'm not covering them up too much. That says it can be on water or grassland. It can't be on a desert when it's placed, but it can be on water or grassland. All animals have one overall rule. You cannot place it with another animal unless every valid habitat already has an animal, in which case you get to choose where you wish to push it. And let's try to get him back into his correct thing. There are also some double-sided tiles. That's not the one I wanted. Like this one. This one is both a gorilla and on the other side a leopard. The leopard has a tree icon. It can only be put where there is a tree. And the gorilla has a mountain icon. He can only be put where there is a mountain. If those features are not existent, you cannot activate that card. You also cannot put cubes on it to prepare it for activation later and choose when to do it. You have to leave one of the symbols uncovered and wait to activate it on a future turn when you're ready for it, and then the draw happens again. It doesn't let you just choose the most beneficial time possible. Alright, so that's map setup, that's placement rules for tokens and animals. Let's talk about the cards themselves. First thing we should talk about is this little player aid and a very important component for the gameplay. This first off tells you what all the symbols are and their rarity. You'll notice some of the symbols, there's only a couple of in the deck, and there's 10 of the sun and 8 of the water. That's a big difference when you're choosing cards. This card I like very much at the start of a game. It only has 2 symbols to activate, but one of them is the rarest symbol in the bag. So this is a little harder to get to activate than you think it is. But there are also all of these cards that have lots of symbols. This one requires 6 symbols, 3 of which are incredibly rare, 3 of which are not. This is on one of the blue cards because it's a high risk reward, big payoff. Might be hard to get out, might be difficult to execute well, but a card like this that has a red border has some kind of destructive or change effect to the environment. Whereas cards that have this green border, which are much more common on the front side, just add things to the world. They're world building. They're just adding to the first continent. Alright, so a card like the shark. You gain points, then you get to place the shark in the water and move it a whole bunch of places. Every single tile it moves through, it eats every animal it encounters. And you get bonus points for every animal consumed. So you're going to spend your game, if you draft this shark card or have this shark in your starting hand, trying to put out a bunch of water animals in a region of water that you can move through and swim with this shark. Then you're going to need a section of water that does not have an animal, so you can place the shark validly before moving him. And then it's also got this nice benefit at the bottom of gain a card, play a card. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are a bunch of little leaf symbols on these cards along the borders of them. This one has a single leaf at the top. What that means is once you have placed enough cubes on it in order to activate the card, the first thing you do when activating a card is take all of your cubes off and put them back to your supply. This is very important because a lot of cards give you more elemental symbols to put on other things. Then you're going to turn the card clockwise. That's not clockwise. How about clockwise? And if it no longer has any leaves on top or has reset to its maximum number of leaves, that card is going to be discarded. Then you execute the full effect. Cards like this one have 1 leaf at the bottom and 2 here and 3 here, so that way the first time you activate it, you turn it clockwise and it's got 2 left, then it's got 1 left, and then the next time, oh, the card's going to get discarded. You can only use these a few times before they go away. It's very important to consider how much use are you going to get out of these cards. There's like one card in the game that allows you to turn another one counterclockwise, which can be a really good combo, but you're going to need a big scoring card that at least has 2 uses, something like this. This is a great in-game card. Put down a tree, gain 6 points, and then gain 1 point for every tree that's in the same habitat of trees. A habitat is a connected region of all adjacent things of the same type. You could have a grassland habitat that's just every grassland connected, a water habitat of all the water connected. Tree and mountain habitats get a little more interesting because they require placement on top of tiles and they can sprawl from different types of tiles depending. You also have sharing the same habitat, or habitat is all about the tiles and the wooden pieces. If they say community, sometimes an animal card will say put down an animal and then do something for every animal in the community. A community is every connected animal of that type. They can sprawl all along the map, curve around, doesn't matter. As long as each one of them is adjacent to another of its type and they're all connected, that's considered a single community. Adjacency. If you are placing a tile, this tile is adjacent to both of the tiles it touches along an edge. It is not considered adjacent to itself. Every once in a while, the way something is worded, people will get confused by that. However, if it was something like this, and it said, place an animal here, and then gain something for every adjacent tree, that tree is on the same tile. It is adjacent to both of these trees. Anything that's on top of the tile is considered adjacent to the thing you just put. The hippo is not adjacent to itself, but it is adjacent to a grassland. It's adjacent to 2 of these trees. Sometimes the adjacency wording messes with people, but it's pretty simple and straightforward in the end. Alright. I'm going to go back to that example I had with the tree thing here. This squiggle symbol is the points. We have a point track hiding in the back here, and the point track actually is modular so that you can flip it around if you prefer for the score track to loop. Oops, I'll put it right side up this time. You can have it loop back and forth, go down one end and come back, or you can leave it so that it jumps row to row every time you max one out. The important scores are 60 or 80. If you want to play a short game, you can play to 60 points. The standard game is 80, and based on my experience with it, I highly recommend you just stick with the 80 as the in-game condition. It's a pretty great one. There's a lot of payout you can get if you've worked all game on one thing. You might be trailing by 20, 30, or even 40 points and then just sprint to the end. It's very satisfying to do something like that in an engine building game of this type. So that's the score tracker. I've told you how cubes are going to be drawn out of here, how you're going to spin your cards as you activate them, a little bit about the setup with the cards. The important thing I wanted to emphasize out of all of these element tiles is the Harbinger, the current first player that activates everything first, will stay the first player over and over and over until they draw a wild element. When they draw the wild element, everyone will use it the way they want to. After everything that is called eco is resolved and all the cascades from that are resolved, the player who drew this will take all of these tiles, put them right back in the bag, and hand the bag to the next player. And the Harbinger will continue to change positions like that throughout the game anytime a wild is drawn. There's not a huge advantage to being the Harbinger, and every once in a while there's actually an advantage to going last, because someone else is going to build the world the way you need it before you score with your cards. Highly variable how important that is going to be. But the main thing that happens there is that when you're passing the bag is the only time you check the in-game condition. If someone hits 80 off of a draw and they're past that score mark, great. Doesn't matter. You keep playing, you keep playing, you keep playing. As soon as a wild is drawn, everyone's going to resolve that, and then the game is over. It gives everyone a little bit of time to finish up their plans, but they're all completely certain the game is in its final throes. Get what points you can and go on. Alright, last thing you need to know. What if you don't have the element that you drew from the bag? Well, if you don't have the element, and actually sometimes even when you do, if it's more important to you, you can spin this tile. Spin it clockwise once, you get no benefit. Second time that you don't use an element and you spin it again, you now have the ability to reset this to the start to gain a card and add it to your hand. In a 3 or 4 player game, you're going to use this a couple times usually. You normally use it later in the game because your start hand gives you plenty of options to work with. I've never felt starved for options in the early game. Just every once in a while I'm fishing for a bigger payout point card. Not sure how I'm going to close out my 80 points. But early in the game, you are going to spin this to the third side pretty regularly. On the third side, at any time you can interrupt anything that's going on to gain 1 cube from the supply. This is pretty important because you only have 7 of these cubes, and if you've got 3 of them on one card waiting for a couple more to activate it, and you've got another couple over here, you're not going to be able to keep placing cubes out unless you have more cubes in your supply. Cards that give you cubes as a result are sometimes really great cards to start with. I like starting with things like this. Get something that's going to be useful to the engine build, gain a cube and a wild. So even though I used a rare symbol on this, I can put it on a rare symbol somewhere else anyway. You can never put it on itself. I can't put that wild right back onto this antelope and try to set off the card faster. A card can never use it on itself. But if a card sets off another card and the other card gives you symbols too, you can totally put it back on the original one. Okay, back to this. The other and very important thing you can do here is play a card. Because in your start hand, you're going to have either 12 cards, or you're going to have the 18 for 2-player. 18 cards for 2-player and 12 for normal 3 and 4 player games. You're only going to have 3 of them in play to start the game. You get to pick which 3. I recommend you have a variety of different symbols in those start cards. Anything that says play a card or gain a cube and isn't 1,000 symbols to play is probably a pretty good choice. But you're going to have to eventually play some more cards and really get that engine rolling. So don't feel bad if they keep drawing water over and over and you've already filled your 2 water spaces and have nowhere else to put it. You're going to be able to just keep spinning this thing and getting those cards out. A nice thing about this being an interrupt is you don't have to choose which card you're going to play the moment you spin it to this. In fact, you want to just start looking at your hand, and the next time they draw a tile that you have no use for and you were considering spinning, that's when you need to decide, do I want a cube or do I want to play a card? Gives you a little more time to think about which card you're going to play. You also can look at the symbol that was just drawn and be like, oh yeah, I need that symbol for this card. Well, let's go ahead and play that now, reset to start, and I will use the symbol after all. Very effective way to do that. I think that's everything that you need in order to be able to play Eco's First Continent. At some point here, I'm going to do a playthrough video of it and let you get an opportunity to see the game in progress. before I do, I'm going to try to improve my video quality so that I'm not only in one little tiny spot with this current webcam. Thank you for watching. This has been Turtler7, a writer for Meeplegamers.